Hey there guys, I actually wanted to put up a video yesterday but ended up running out of time. So we're going to try to do two today. Once again, the reason for doing this is I'm planning on doing a video on the first NHL hockey game on the Sega Genesis that should come out this Saturday. We're still on pace, believe it or not, to make it. I know it's only like a couple days away, but we should be fine. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to play one of the great old favorites, which is ice hockey on the NES. The reason why is, of course, because I kind of want to do a little bit of comparison, and at least show everybody like the difference between what we had at the NES era and what the PlayStation era, the Sega Genesis era had to give us. So, I don't really care who we play against. We'll do Speed 3 and we'll do this. This, of course, if you haven't played this game, this is like the all-time classic hockey game. I don't know if there's any actual advice or strategy for this game. It's just fun is what this game is. Sometimes you can get it to fight. So there's a couple of interesting bits of trivia about NES ice hockey. Whoops. I always forget to do that. You're supposed to actually control your goalie and not just, run around trying to fight with guys. The biggest bit of trivia about this game, which I haven't really played this game for years, is that this game was actually originally a Famicom Disk System game. I think it was actually one of the first FDS games to ever be released, actually. So that's kind of where the origins of this game comes from. I mean, there are lines in this game, as you can see, but it doesn't really matter. They're not going to call offside or anything like that. It's just such a simple approach, but it's really such an effective game, right? Because you have like the combination of holding down the button, the B button to shoot fast, as well as like all of the physics of the game and how they work, and then sort of the craziness of the players. You have three different types of players: the skinny guy, the fat guy, and then the other guy, and they all have their own strengths and weaknesses. I accidentally just put a filter here on the emulator, so if the game looks a little bit different, that's why. See if I can change it again. Apparently I can't. Okay, well, whatever. Not sure exactly what button it is I pushed, but whatever. We'll just keep going with this. Anyway, yeah, this is an extremely fun arcade style game, and this is one of those games where if you were a kid, and especially if you played this game multiplayer, you never really forgot it. It's one of those great all-time classics. Now, I mean, it's not realistic, at all. For example, it's a 4-on-4 game instead of being 5-on-5, right? That would be one of the most basic, things you want to get right. But it doesn't really matter. This is back in the days when, the focus of making sports games was less on trying to make them, as accurate to life as possible, and it was more on just making them something that's fun. Now, as you know, a really good sports game needs to have a little bit of both. So you want to make it so the game, is at least, somewhat possible for the player to actually play, and so that it feels like it's an actual game. But at the same time, you also want to make it so that, you're not going to be at a total disadvantage just because you happen to choose this team or that. And so that's kind of the way that this game works. It doesn't really matter which country you choose. They're all basically the same. It kind of matters whether you choose, what player combination you choose, but not really that much. And the thing is, whoops, that was bad on my part. The thing that you have to remember about this is that this was also back at a time when RPG gaming was all the rage in Japan. So if you're looking and asking, well, why do they have three different basically classes of players? Well, it's because the most popular games in Japan when did this come out? 1987. Tended to be games that gave you similar choices. Anyway, this is a game that I definitely want to at some point in time do a much deeper dive into, but we want to get through the classic NHL series first, for a variety of reasons. Of course, I think probably the biggest one is that most people remember those games and think of those games first when they think of great hockey games. Now on the NES, there are two great hockey games. You got this one, and then you've got Blades of Steel. Blades of Steel, similar to this game, like, it doesn't really matter which team you choose. They're all more or less the same, and you can have success with any team regardless of which one you choose. The difference between these games, of course, is that, like, this game is basically like barely controlled chaos on the ice, whereas Blades of Steel is a little bit more like what you would expect a hockey game to be like. This game is just total, like, you know, totally chaotic, and all sorts of crazy and interesting things happen, like they did right there. Anyway, this game, I would argue, probably has better animations overall than Blades of Steel, and the AI in this game's a little bit better. Blades of Steel, which is a game that I owned when I was a kid, like, you can really cheese the computer on Blades of Steel. It's not that hard. Once you, I mean, I'm going to probably play that game a little bit later on today so you can kind of see what I'm talking about, but once you get to a certain point in Blades of Steel, it's like, you know, you can start winning every game by, you know, 10 goals or more. Yeah. It's a little bit easier to play. This game can get really chaotic, especially at the highest speed level, which is the reason why I decided not to do that here. I really don't know. This is the reason why I want to do kind of a video on it eventually. I don't know much about, like, how this game was programmed, and, you know, which, like, I'm assuming this was one of those famous Nintendo R&D teams or whatever that put this together, but I don't know much more about it. And it's kind of odd that this would be one of the first Famicom Disk System games, because it's not like hockey was, you know, an extraordinarily popular sport in Japan. If you read a lot of old Japanese video game magazines, what you'll realize is, especially like in, you know, the 1980s, like, there was this fascination with, you know, with the Famicom, and, like, with the idea of just, you know, computer versions or video game versions of, like, any type of sport or game possible. So there's a lot of stuff that came out that is a little bit surprising. Alright, so we tied. Great. Anyway, you've basically here seen just about everything. The one thing that we haven't seen yet is you can get, like, a scuffle between players going, which I've been kind of trying to do, but haven't had much success at doing. If you're lucky, though, you'll see, like, a massive brawl that breaks out. That's probably the most fun part of the game. Oh, icing is a thing in this game, though. I'm not sure about that. I thought that was from the red line. I totally forgot about that. So yeah, this game has icing, which is pretty cool. I mean, even you know, NHL hockey, like on the Genesis, if you play NHL hockey and you turn the penalties off, icing still counts, so you still can't ice the puck. You would think that of, like, all the, you know, options they would give you, they would start off with the option to get rid of icing because it's so annoying, but whatever. Oh, shoot. And when I was a kid, I was always, like, confused when I was playing on defense. Like, should I focus on the puck, or should I focus on the goalie, or what should I do? Probably should start focusing more on the goalie. Anyway, there you have it. I mean, as you'll see here, you know, the average game of ice hockey, as the Zambonis come out, average game of ice hockey probably will take about 15 minutes or so to play if you're playing 7-minute mode. You can play for longer if you want, and you know, the thing about this game is that even to this day, if you're looking for, like, an NES 2-player game that's a lot of fun and that will keep you and, like, your spouse or you and your kid or whatever, you know, really entertained for a long time, this is the one to go for. I mean, this game has so much replay value. It's fun to play against the computer, but it's a heck of a lot of fun to play against another player. That's really the best way to play it. Now, there's one other, in addition to this and Blades of Steel, there's one other 8-bit hockey game that we'll play probably briefly at the beginning, and that's the old Kunio-kun hockey game, which is, I believe, the best of the Kunio-kun games probably on any platform. That game is crazy and is a lot of fun. If you haven't seen that game before, you really have to watch it, or you have to play it, I was going to say. That's actually one of the first games that I ever played that was not a US release back when I started getting into emulation back in like 1997. There was a partially translated version of that game, I think, that I got. But, I mean, you'll see. We'll play the Japanese version. You don't really need to know what the story is. It's pretty easy to figure out what's going on in the game, even without knowing the full storyline. Alright. Okay, let's get back on defense here. So part of the problem is that I'm controlling the goalie, which means that I keep pushing the button over to the left, which apparently is telling all of my players that I want them on the other side of the ice. Not exactly what I wanted to have happen, but it's alright. I should mention too, that's one of the other really cool things about this game, which is that your goalie has a lot of mobility. Instead of being like stuck to a very, very small area, he can move like forward, he can move backward and stuff like that, which is, I think, a really, really good design decision. Now, whether it's realistic or not is another question, but it makes you feel like you have a lot of control over what happens. What would be a little bit better, though, is if you didn't have to control your goalie, and instead you could have like the computer do it, and then you can focus on something else. Or if you could, you know, when you're controlling him, like not also control a player at the same time. Now, the other thing you need to know about this game is that this actually, I don't remember if this came in a black box. I think that it came in a blue box. I don't think, but either way, this doesn't really qualify as a black box Nintendo game, even though you might think that it does, right? It has all of like the stock Nintendo sounds and, you know, I mean, like almost every 8-bit game on the NES has, you know, these types of sprites and stuff. So it seems like it's a really generic game, but you know, this is a game that came out a little bit later. This game came out in North America. I think it was either late '87 or early '88, and this would have been during the famous chip shortage. So this was during a time when NES games were really, really expensive because Nintendo had. Some people would say Nintendo had a manufactured chip shortage. But anyway, the rumor was that there were not enough chips to go around for all the companies, and so supply was low, and demand for these games, of course, was really, really high because they're a lot of fun. And we won. Look at that, 11-9. That's a real 1980s scoreline for you. Anyway, so as a result, if you were a kid and you were lucky enough for your parents to pay like 50 or 55 bucks for a game, and they gave you this, you were really, really happy. Whereas if you were a kid and they ended up getting you a game like a couple years later, like Major League Baseball by LJN or NFL by LJN or something like that, maybe you weren't quite as lucky. Anyway, there you have it. I'm going to eventually take a shower here today and comb my hair and stuff like that. But there's a little bit of ice hockey for you. Like I said, we'll try to play some Blades of Steel later on today, and either today or tomorrow we'll play the famous Kunio-kun game, which is probably my favorite NES hockey game. And then we can have a couple of minutes and so on of B-roll, so we can compare all of that with what EA was doing with NHL hockey and see just how many leaps ahead EA had made. So there you have it. Talk to you again later. Bye-bye.